Thank you very much, Dr. Mansour, Dr. Thomas, Mr. Samuel, and press, and all the audience. I would like to say that English is not my mother language. So I speak Slovene, it's not proper to this country. I can speak fluently Spanish, so I'll try to do the best to express all the information I found during these 3-4 days visiting your beautiful country. First, I have to express my thanks to all authorities, to Dr. Mansour, the minister, to all other people from the Ministry of Health and Ministry of Information. We all were performing studies all the 3 days, and I would like to express some important points related to this issue. First of all, it's my congratulations to what a Minister of Information and Broadcasting was expressing or expressed in his speech. Indeed, for all these our developing countries, communication matter, strategic need to work in all other fields. But let me say first some few words on about what is the telephone communication or some other frequency modulated station or electromagnetic fields issue related to public health or to health issue. You know that mobile telephony is a very important part of a modern telecommunication systems. In many countries, as it is Antigua and Barbuda, probably is one of the most important way to communicate. As mentioned above, it is important to investigate, understand, and monitor periodically any potential public health impact. Mobile phones to work properly and communicate efficiently, the company, they know this very well, and be able to cover different sites in the island, need a network of fixed antenna towers or structures called base stations. So, all the mobile telephony is using radio frequency transmitters with peak powers in the range, it's very low range, between 0.1 to 2 watts, operating at frequency between 450 to 2700 megahertz frequency. Usually in the island, as all in South America countries, we're using 850, 100 megahertz communication system. PCS, it's around 1900 megahertz communication systems, as well as 2700 or 2700, which is for internet and other systems. For the telephone handset, the telephone only transmits power when it is turned on. If you're looking for exposure to users, you will find that this exposure falls off very rapidly with increasing distance between handset and the head. A person using a mobile phone about 30 to 40 centimeters away from their body, for example, when text message, accessing to the internet, or using hand-free devices, are lowering a lot of this power transmitting to the body. What about possible health effects? From 30 years ago, a large number of studies have been performed over the last 2 decades to assess whether mobile phones pose or not potential health risk. To date, no adverse health effects have been established and proved as being caused by mobile phone use. Epidemiological research examining potential lung risk from radio frequency exposure has mostly looked for an association between brain tumors you may glioma or meningioma, and the mobile phone use. Several epidemiological studies have been completed or are still ongoing, including case control studies and prospective cohort studies. The largest retrospective case study control to date on adults, the named Interphone study, which was performed in 13 countries, was designed to determine whether there are links between use of mobile phones and head or neck cancer in adults. The pooled analysis of data obtained from 13 participating countries found no increased risk of glioma or meningioma with mobile phone use of more than 10 years. So, based largely on this data, International Agency on Research on Cancer has classified radiofrequency electromagnetic fields in a position of 2B. But before we're talking to this issue, let me talk a little more about how the measurements were performed. We were measuring exposure in the vicinity or at the vicinity to tower stations or to towers which are needed to emit the senior. The exposures from towers are still lower than from the handset and will be about 10 to 20 times lower than the exposure received from a handset, from the mobile telephone. You will find also that in many hospitals and medical centers, the mobile phones are usually prohibited. And this is not to the health effects mostly, but this is to interfere with some electromedical device or in special case in the communication with the navigation systems. So this is the reason, not mainly the health risk. How we can know that all these findings are inside or below of exposure limits? The exposure limits for mobile phone users, as well as other radio frequency sources, and I have to point that usually the many people they are pointing to towers which are working with telecommunication system, with mobile telephony, but that many times they are forgetting that other sources as FM, as frequency modulated transmitters, are much more powerful. So usually the scientists relate these exposure limits to a physical expression which is named specific absorption rate. And this is the rate how energy is absorbed in the different parts of our body. For frequency modulated stations, I mean what you call FM stations, special precaution needs to be taken into account because their power used to be between 10 to 50 times higher than from communication towers. The institution who is in charge in the international level to discuss and to present recommendation is called International Commission on Non-Ionizing Radiation. It's ICNIRP, a short way to call it. This office has developed exposure guidelines. You can find them in different technical publications. So for the workers, as well as for general public. Except for patients, they are sometimes going or undergoing medical diagnosis or treatment using this radiation. These guidelines are based on a detailed assessment of the available scientific evidence. The same way as it was expressed before for Dr. Mansour, WHO established an international electromagnetic field project in 1996 to assess the scientific evidence of possible adverse health effects from electromagnetic fields. WHO will conduct a formal risk assessment of all study health edition and, as noted above, the International Agency for Research on Cancer, which is the base scientific information which WHO is following. And finally, this last information, probably many of you were in the press a couple of months ago, which was published at the end of the day from International Agency for Cancer Research, which just states electromagnetic fields in the group 2B. What this means, group 2B? It means that it's called possibly carcinogenic sources. You know, IARC classified in 4 different groups. Group 1, they're definitely, these agents are carcinogenic, as tobacco, as we know, X-rays, and 2 have 2 separate classifications. 2A, which is some information on animal study, which is indeed confirmed, and 2B, which the information is not so strong in human, but have some evidence in animal study. So if I have to compare electromagnetic radiation with some other agents, which are about more than 200 in this group, for example, coffee has more or less the same risk, potential risk, as electromagnetic radiation, but is stated or is just indicated in the same group. The study or the classification was based mainly and related to the increasing use of mobile phones and the lack of data for mobile use over time periods longer than 15 years. In particular, with the recent popularity of mobile phone use among young people and therefore a potential longer life of exposure, WHO has promoted further research on this group. Several studies investigating potential health hazards in children and young people are underway. Let me see finally what was the measurements and exposure data findings in the Antigua Island sites. As it was mentioned before, under the direction of Ministry of Information Broadcasting as well as of the Ministry of Health, with a collaboration with Pan American Health Organization and the regional representative in this country, I was invited to start findings and outcomes in different sites in this country. First, I love this country. Indeed, you are not in a special holiday season, you are in a hurricane season, but still so with the rain, it is a beautiful country. So I enjoy, not too much because there are not a lot of stations on the beach. So I have to visit other sites. But still so, when I arrived Tuesday afternoon, first we had a brief meeting, discussed with the Ministry of Information, Ministry of Health, what is needed in this country and what is expected to be found in these measurements. Let me say again that to perform these measurements is not easy. You can measure very easily the pressure in the air, the humidity in the air, but to measure electromagnetic fields, you need a proper instrumentation calibrated in this energy level, in this frequency range, because if not, the findings will be completely wrong. It is not to go to place, have a radio frequency indicator and say, okay, that the measurement value is high. You need prior or before calibrate the instrument in the region of 850, 1900 as well as 2700 frequency region. And then you need to know what is the reference level. So what I can say, we performed up to date, to this morning, about 63 sites where we performed, at least in every site, from 3 to 10 different measurements, and we are going to do an average value. Even so, the final report will be sent to the Ministry of Information and Health, so they will discuss, but up to date, definitely 100%, I may say that all the values, absolutely all, are very, very below the exposure limits. I can mention this. There are two exposure limits internationally used. One of them is electric field exposure, and another one is power density exposure, which are, of course, linked with some mathematical expression. The lowest level is not stated for mobile telephony. It is stated for frequency modulated stations. Even so, we were using the lowest exposure limit, which is for electric field limit 27.5 volt per meter. So I may say that in communication towers in the vicinity or around between 50 and 100 meters, mainly all of these are between 20 to 100 times lower than the exposure limit of E-field. So again, we can compare, if somebody wants to do with the power density units, which are expressed in watt per square meter, but in practice we are using microwatt per square centimeters. The average exposure limit is 200. Again, the value found in practically all of these sites are around 20 to 100 times lower than this value. I'm saying practically because we also visited frequency modulated station as well as directly the towers which are built in the top of the hills as a Peggy, what's the name of Obama Peak or Boggy Peak. We're working inside of the area which is limited by the fence. There, the limits of course are higher, but it is expected. If not, nobody will have a signal in the city or the towns or the villages. Still so, these levels are below the working limits. It means that somebody who is fixing or doing maintenance work or job can be stay there at least for 6 minutes, but there are nobody living in the near vicinity. When I'm talking and expressing near vicinity, I'm talking between 100 or 200 meters. So all these places, you can call them hot places, which of course nobody when may live there or is permitted to their homes or houses. Even these places are permitted for in working conditions. So this is my preliminary information or findings, and of course I'm available for any question you are wanted to ask me.
Okay. At this point,